A single courtroom can become the stage where lives are torn apart or stitched back together. And in this case, every glance, every whisper carried weight heavier than the law itself. A mother fought not only against poverty and prejudice, but also against the shadows of her past, while three children, small in years but fierce in spirit, spoke truths that no one could deny. Their voices cracked the walls of authority and pulled into the open a secret that could destroy reputations and redefine family forever. This story builds slowly, each moment drawing you closer to a revelation no one in that room was prepared to face. If you're ready to follow it, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what you think lies ahead. Angela Brown was a black single mother, and in her small southern town, that alone painted a target on her back. She lived every day carrying the double burden of raising her 7-year-old triplets, Marcus, Layla, and Jordan, while facing a world that was all too ready to remind her that her skin made her less in their eyes. Every morning she rose before dawn in her cramped apartment, braiding Layla's hair into neat plaits, ironing Marcus's shirt until the crease looked sharp even though the fabric was threadbare, and pressing Jordan's school folder against his chest so he could hold it like armor. She whispered encouragement to them as if they were going into battle, because in many ways they were. They were black children in a place that measured them first by color, before anything else. At the diner where she worked double shifts, Angela wore her faded uniform and stained white apron, trying her best to appear steady, though her shoes pinched her feet and her soul carried more weight than the trays she balanced. On the day her world shifted, the diner was filled with the smell of coffee and grease, the clatter of forks against chipped plates, and the hum of white customers who rarely looked at her except to demand more sugar. She tried to keep her triplets hidden in the back booth. Their school had let out early, and she had no one to watch them. They sat quietly, coloring on scraps of paper, behaving better than most grown customers. She prayed her boss wouldn't notice, but prayers often went unanswered in a place that had never shown mercy to her kind. Mr. Simmons, her boss, was a heavy-set white man with a sneer that rarely left his face. He stormed out from behind the counter, his voice slicing through the clamor. "Angela, this ain't no daycare," he snapped, loud enough for every customer to hear. "You embarrassing the place, dragging them kids in here." Heat rose up Angela's neck, her face flushed with shame. She tried to explain softly, "School let out early, Mr. Simmons. I didn't have another choice." But he wasn't interested in explanations. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to drip poison. "Maybe if you people learned responsibility, you wouldn't be stuck like this." The words cut deeper than any knife. Angela swallowed hard, her chest tight, but before she could stop him, Marcus shot up from the booth, fists clenched, his small voice shaking but strong. "Don't talk to my mama like that. She works harder than you." The entire diner froze. Forks hovered midair. Layla slid out from the booth to stand beside her brother, her chin high, eyes burning. "You're just jealous because nobody loves you," she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The room gasped. A few chuckles rippled through the white customers, cruel and sharp. Simmons's face flushed crimson, his jaw clenching as he spat the words that crushed her last ounce of dignity. "That's it. You're done. You're fired. Get out of here before I call someone to drag you out." Angela's chest hollowed. She wanted to scream, wanted to demand justice, but instead she gathered her children's hands, forcing them toward the door while whispers and snickers followed her like shadows. Out on the street, the sun was too bright, exposing her humiliation. She walked fast, her hands trembling as she clutched Marcus's shoulder, Layla's small hand, Jordan's folder. She could hear the customers laughing behind the windows, their faces pressed to the glass as if she were a spectacle, a show they'd paid to see. By the time she reached their apartment building, her legs ached. The steps up to the second floor felt like a mountain she had no strength left to climb. Her fingers fumbled with her keys, then froze as she saw the paper taped across the door. Bold black letters shouted at her, 10 days, TO vacate. Her vision blurred with tears. She ripped the notice down with shaking hands, but neighbors had already come out onto their balconies. White families leaned against the railings, whispering, pointing. Some shook their heads in fake pity, Others smirked, as if the eviction were proof they had always been right about her. Angela shoved the children inside quickly, locking the door behind her. Inside the small living room, the walls seemed to close in, pressing her down until she sank to her knees. The weight of humiliation, job loss, and now eviction broke through the walls she had built around her. Her shoulders shook as sobs ripped out of her chest. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, her voice cracking. But her triplets didn't let her fall alone. Marcus knelt on one side, gripping her hand tightly. "Don't cry, Mama. We'll fight for you." Layla pressed her cheek against her mother's arm. "We'll never let them take us away." And Jordan, the quietest of the three, whispered with surprising steadiness, "We're your soldiers, Mama. Soldiers never quit." Angela looked at them through blurred tears. Her baby's just 7, but speaking with the courage of grown men and women who had endured battles far beyond their years. She pulled them close, wrapping them in her arms, clinging to their warmth. For a moment, the cruel words of her boss, the whispers of her neighbors, and the eviction notice on her door disappeared. All that mattered was the strength of her children's love. Later that night, she tucked them into their shared bed. The mattress sagged, the blanket was thin, but she smoothed it over them carefully. She lingered, brushing curls from their foreheads, kissing their cheeks. She wanted to memorize the way their small bodies breathed, rising and falling in rhythm, a reminder that they were still here, still hers. There in the doorway stood Harold Whitman, the white landlord whose belly strained against his shirt and whose face always carried a sneer of disdain when he looked at Angela, as if her very existence was an inconvenience. His voice carried down the hallway, loud enough for every neighbor to hear. "Rent's due, Miss Brown, and matter of fact, it's past due. I've given you enough chances, and now you and those 3 little rugrats are out of here in 10 days. Don't pay up, don't bother staying." Angela's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to step forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Whitman, please, I just lost my job yesterday. I'll figure something out. Just give me a little more time." But he waved her off with a thick hand, his eyes narrowing. "I don't want excuses. You people are always full of excuses. You bring shame to this building. Maybe the state should take those kids off your hands. At least then they might have a chance." The words sliced through her like knives, but before she could respond, Layla stepped forward, her small fists balled at her sides, her chin tilted high. "Don't you dare talk to our mama like that," she said, her voice shaking but strong. Whitman bent low until his face was inches from hers, his breath sour. "Little girl, you better learn some respect." Layla's eyes filled with tears, but she did not back down. "She earns respect. You're just a bully because you're mean." Gasps rippled from the neighbors gathered on the stairs, some whispering with pity, others smirking with cruelty. Whitman's face turned red with anger. "Control your kids before I call child services. Might be better for them anyway." At that, Marcus stormed forward, planting himself in front of his mother, his voice firm. "You don't know anything about us. Mama works harder than anybody in this building." Whitman leaned in so close Marcus could see the sweat on his forehead, but the boy did not flinch. From behind her siblings, Jordan's quiet voice rose, trembling but steady. "We're not scared of you. We're not leaving Mama." The landlord spat on the floor and straightened, his voice booming through the hall. "Fine, you think you're brave? Let's see how brave you are when the sheriff's at your door." With that, he turned and stomped away, muttering curses loud enough for all to hear. Angela's face burned with shame as the neighbor's eyes lingered on her. She pulled her children back inside and shut the door quickly, locking it twice. She slumped against the door, her hands trembling. Marcus tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, don't cry. He can't take us. We'll protect you." Angela covered her face with her hands, the tears sliding through her fingers. Layla climbed onto her lap, pressing her forehead against her chest. "We got you, Mama. Always." Jordan clutched her apron, whispering, "We're not going anywhere. We promise." Angela hugged them tightly, feeling their small bodies pressed against her, their warmth and determination stronger than anything she had left inside herself. But Whitman's words haunted her. Foster care, the sheriff, 10 days. She knew the world was circling in on her, and she feared the storm that was about to hit. She wanted them to look their best because appearances mattered, especially when people were eager to believe the worst about a black mother raising children alone. The triplets, sensing her heaviness, had already laid out their best clothes, and when Angela asked what they were doing, Layla replied firmly, "Church today, Mama. Pastor Daniels will know what to do." Angela hesitated, her heart aching with the thought that even God might have turned his face away from her. But Micah whispered softly, "But he can pray, and sometimes prayers get answered." With no better answers of her own, Angela gathered her strength and walked with them to Mount Zion Baptist, the small church on the corner that had always been her refuge when the storms of life raged too hard. As they entered, the choir's voices rose in thunder and honey, the rhythm filling the sanctuary with hope she struggled to grasp. She sat with her children pressed against her side, their little hands gripping hers, their eyes shining with faith that she had nearly lost. When the service ended, Angela slipped quietly into Pastor Daniels' office. He was a tall black man with kind eyes and a graying beard, and when he looked up from his desk and saw her trembling, he immediately stood. "Tasha, child, what's wrong?" he asked, though he could already see the exhaustion written on her face. Her voice cracked as she explained, "Job gone, rent overdue, eviction looming, and now the landlord says he'll call child services. They're threatening to take my babies, Pastor, and I don't know how much more I can take." Her words tumbled out between sobs until she could not speak anymore. The pastor leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "You've always been strong, Angela, but sometimes the strongest need help, too. The church fund is stretched thin, but I'll see what I can gather." Marcus, who had been listening from the doorway, burst in, his little fists clenched tight. "Please, Pastor, don't let them take us away." Pastor Daniels' eyes softened, and he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No one's going to take you if I can help it, son." For a brief moment, Angela felt a flicker of hope, but when she left his office, she knew the truth. Kind words and prayers could not stop the eviction notice taped to her door, nor silence the landlord who wanted her gone, nor protect her children from a system that had never shown mercy to families like hers. That afternoon, she tried to carry on as normal, cooking beans and rice for dinner, though her hands shook as she stirred the pot. Marcus wandered into her bedroom searching for a pencil, but instead his eyes fell on something sticking out of a drawer. It was an envelope yellowed with age, and across the front was written a single name in faded ink, Anthony. Curiosity burning, Marcus pulled it open and read the first line of a letter, his heart skipping. "Angela, I can't be a father right now. My family would never accept this. I'm sorry." His eyes widened just as Angela rushed in, her face pale as chalk. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she cried, snatching the paper from his hands. "Mama, who's Anthony?" he asked, but her chest heaved as she balled the letter, tossed it into the trash, and struck a match to burn it right there in the waste bin. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished in smoke as she whispered harshly, "That name doesn't matter. It never mattered. Don't you ever go through my things again." Marcus backed away, hurt and confused, but the fire in his mother's eyes told him there was more to their story than she had ever admitted. That evening, as the smell of burnt paper still lingered in the apartment, another knock came at the door. Angela froze, her stomach dropping, but when she opened it, a tall woman in a gray suit stood holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Brown?" she asked, her tone clipped but not unkind. "I'm Ms. Carter from Child Services. I received a report about your living conditions. May I come in?" Angela wanted to slam the door shut, but her children were already peeking around her legs. Reluctantly, she stepped aside, and Ms. Carter walked through the apartment, taking notes on peeling paint, the empty fridge, and stacks of unpaid bills. She also observed how quickly the children defended their mother, how tightly they clung to her hand, their loyalty fierce. "Your children are very loyal," Ms. Carter said quietly, almost to herself. "They're all I have," Angela replied, her voice trembling. The woman made a final note, then closed her folder. "We'll review the situation in court. Please be prepared." Then came the knock at the door, sharp and deliberate, making the walls shake. Angela froze, the spatula hovering over the skillet, her heart thudding, so loud she thought the children could hear it. Marcus whispered, "Mama, who is it?" But she already knew. She set the spatula down with trembling fingers and walked to the door, forcing herself to open it. A uniformed officer stood on the porch, his face blank, and beside him was a woman holding a sealed envelope stamped with the county seal. "Mrs. Angela Brown?" the woman asked, her voice brisk. "Yes," Angela croaked, barely audible. The woman held out the envelope. "This is a summons to appear in family court. The state has opened a case concerning the custody of your 3 children. Failure to appear will result in immediate intervention by Child Protective Services." The words struck like lightning, and Angela's breath caught in her chest as the officer tipped his hat, and together they walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, clutching the envelope that felt heavier than bricks. The triplets rushed forward, their eyes wide. "Mama, what is it?" Layla asked, tugging at her skirt. Angela stumbled back to the couch, tearing the envelope open with shaking hands, and her eyes raced across the words until they blurred with tears. "They want to take you away from me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We have to go to court next week." "No," Marcus shouted, his small fists pounding the couch cushion. "They can't do that." Jordan slid closer, tugging at her sleeve. "Mama, we'll tell them. We'll make them listen." Angela shook her head violently, clutching the papers to her chest. "No, baby, court is not for children. I'll handle it." But the triplets exchanged a look, their little faces fierce with determination. And in that silent exchange they made a decision their mother did not yet realize. They would not remain silent. That night Angela sat at the kitchen table, the summons spread before her like an enemy she could not fight. Her head rested in her hands, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and fear. Marcus lingered in the doorway, watching her, his heart aching at the sight. "Mama," he said softly, "you're scared, huh?" Angela lifted her head, forcing a tired smile. "No, baby, I'm just tired." But Marcus wasn't fooled. "We'll help you. You don't have to fight alone." Before she could respond, Layla stormed into the room, dragging Jordan behind her, a crumpled sheet of notebook paper in her hands. She slapped it down on the table with stubborn defiance. In big, messy letters it read, "Our mama is the best mama in the world." Angela's chest tightened, her eyes filling with tears. "You children don't understand. Court isn't a school play. They won't clap when you talk." Layla's chin lifted. "Then we'll make them listen." Jordan tugged her sleeve, his voice soft but steady. "If we don't talk, they'll only hear lies about you. We got to tell the truth." Angela's tears spilled over as she pulled them into her arms, hugging them so tightly they could barely breathe. "Oh, my babies, you're too brave for this world." Over the next days, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. Where there had been despair, now there was a kind of determination. The kitchen table became their courtroom, and the children rehearsed their speeches with passion. Marcus stood on a chair, pounding a plastic spoon like a gavel. "Objection," he shouted. "My mama works hard every day to take care of us." Layla rolled her eyes but smiled. "You can't just say objection all the time. You have to tell a story." She stood tall and spoke to an imaginary judge. "Your Honor, every night Mama sings us to sleep even when she's tired. She never lets us feel unloved." Jordan shuffled forward shyly, clutching his folder of certificates. "And I got these because Mama stayed up helping me. That proves she's a good mom." Angela watched from the doorway, torn between pride and fear. Her children were preparing for a battle they shouldn't have to fight, but they had made up their minds, and no one could stop them. 3 days before the court date, the landlord returned, pounding on the door with 2 men standing behind him. Angela stepped outside quickly, pulling the door shut so the children wouldn't hear. "Time's almost up, Miss Brown," Whitman sneered. "You don't got the money. You and those kids will be on the street. Court ain't gonna save you. Everybody knows you can't provide. Those kids will end up where they belong in the system." The words struck like knives, rage rising in Angela's chest. But before she could reply, the door burst open behind her and Marcus stood there, his fists clenched, his small voice rising with fury. "You're a liar. Our mama's better than you'll ever be." Layla and Jordan joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder, their little faces burning with defiance. "We're not scared of you," Layla shouted. "Mama's stronger than you'll ever be." Whitman's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "Little brats, you'll regret that." He turned and stomped down the stairs with his men, leaving Angela trembling. She pulled her children back inside, her voice shaking. "Don't you ever open that door again when I'm talking to him. Do you hear me?" "But Mama," Marcus protested. "He was lying about you. We can't just stay quiet." Angela hugged him, her tears soaking his hair. "I know, baby, but sometimes staying safe means staying silent." But the children exchanged a look she couldn't ignore. None of them agreed. Silence had never saved them before, and they weren't about to let it start now. She whispered to her children as she buttoned the last sleeve, "Keep your heads up, don't let them see us weak," though her own head hung heavy. The triplets clung to her skirt as they walked down the street, neighbors whispering from balconies and doorways, some with pity, others with cruelty. "Poor kids never had a father. No way she'll keep them," one woman muttered loud enough for Angela to hear. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, gripping his mother's hand harder. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps rising like a fortress, each one heavier than the last as they climbed together. Inside, the hallway buzzed with voices, shoes scraping against marble floors, lawyers with briefcases passing them as if they didn't exist. When their case was called, Angela's knees trembled, but she pulled her children close and entered the courtroom. The ceiling soared high, the walls lined with wooden panels, the air thick with judgment. At the bench sat Judge Anthony Wright, his black robe falling heavy around him. He adjusted his glasses and stared down at Angela and the three children pressed close at her side. Something flickered in his eyes, something unsettled, though Angela didn't notice it then. "All rise," the bailiff called, his voice echoing. Everyone stood, and the judge nodded for them to sit. Angela's heart pounded as the prosecutor, a tall white man with slicked back hair and a voice sharp as steel, wasted no time. "Your Honor, this case is about three children living in unsafe, unstable conditions. Their mother, Ms. Brown, has no stable income, no proper housing, and no father in the home to provide support. We will show that the children would be safer and healthier in state custody." His words sliced like a knife. Layla's small fists clenched at the mention of no father. Jordan shrank closer to Angela, and Marcus glared with a fury far too old for his 7 years. The prosecutor called his first witness, and Angela's stomach dropped when she saw who it was, Mr. Whitman, the landlord. He swaggered to the stand, tugging at his tie, his smirk spreading across his pale face. "Your Honor," he began, "that woman hasn't paid rent in months. Her kids run wild in the hallways, loud and unsupervised. It ain't fit for children. I run a respectable building, and she's bringing it down." The words stung like poison, and Angela's face burned with shame, but before she could stop her, Layla shot to her feet, tears in her eyes. "That's a lie," she cried, her small voice echoing in the courtroom. Gasps rippled across the gallery, and Judge Wright slammed his gavel. "Silence in the courtroom," he barked, though his voice carried a strange tremor. Angela tugged Layla down quickly, whispering, "Please, baby, not now." But Layla's eyes still blazed with anger. "He's lying, Mama." "You're a good mom," she whispered fiercely, and though the judge scolded, his gaze lingered on the child longer than it should have, his expression strangely shaken. The prosecutor pressed on, leaning closer to the landlord. "So, Mr. Whitman, in your opinion, these children would be better off elsewhere?" "Absolutely," the landlord smirked. "Anywhere is better than with her." The words cut Angela to her core. Her lips trembled, but before she could speak, Marcus rose to his feet, his small frame shaking, but his voice firm. "That's not true. Our mama takes care of us better than anybody could. She stays up all night just so we can eat. She helps with homework. She makes us laugh." Judge Wright barked, "Order," but his gavel hovered midair, his eyes fixed on the boy, and something deep within them stirred, recognition flickering in a place he had buried for years. The prosecutor scoffed, "Your Honor, children have no place testifying in this manner." But Jordan's shy voice rose, trembling yet clear. I got a 100 on my math test because Mama stayed up with me even when she was tired. That proves she's a good mom." He held up the crumpled paper from his folder, his small hands shaking. The courtroom fell silent, reporters scribbling furiously, a woman in the gallery dabbing her eyes. Angela buried her face in her hands, humiliated yet filled with pride. Her children were fighting for her, unafraid of authority, and the judge's hand trembled on his gavel as he stared at them, his mind dragging him back 7 years to a younger woman, a night of passion, and a decision he had buried under ambition. He shook the thought away and barked again. "Enough. This court will maintain order. Ms. Brown, control your family." Angela pulled her children close, whispering desperately, "I know you want to help, but let me handle this." Yet Marcus's jaw stayed tight, Layla's eyes burned, and Jordan clutched his paper like a weapon. The prosecutor smirked, as if victory was already his. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Ms. Brown cannot provide. These children are emotionally compromised and defensive, which further shows instability. We request immediate consideration of foster placement." Don't ask questions we don't need answers to. Yet inside she knew the question would only grow louder, especially in Marcus's stubborn heart. During recess, Judge Wright retreated to his chambers, pacing like a caged lion. His clerk, Harris, peeked in nervously. "Sir, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Wright snapped, then softened as he waved for the case file again. He flipped through the papers, unpaid rent, job termination, eviction notices. But it wasn't the paperwork that shook him. It was the social worker's notes. Children extremely loyal to mother, protective, fiercely vocal. He pressed his palms against his eyes, memories clawing back. Tasha years ago, her laughter like music. And the night he walked away with nothing but a coward's letter. Now here they were, living proof of his betrayal, calling him Your Honor instead of Daddy. Back in the hallway, Angela knelt before her children. "Listen to me, babies. You can't keep interrupting. Please, they'll twist everything you say against us." Marcus's eyes blazed. "But Mama, if we don't speak, no one will hear the truth." Angela's voice cracked. "I'll speak for us. That's my job." Jordan tugged her sleeve. "Mama, what if they ask about our dad?" Her chest seized. "Then you say nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. That chapter is closed." But Marcus muttered under his breath, "Maybe it's not closed. Maybe he's closer than you think." Angela's eyes snapped wide. "What did you say?" But Marcus only pressed his lips tight. He had seen the way the judge's eyes trembled when they met his, and the suspicion rooted deeper. When court resumed, the prosecutor called the social worker, Ms. Carter, to testify. She described peeling paint, an empty fridge, an eviction notice, but she also admitted, "The children are clearly bonded to their mother. I've never seen loyalty so fierce." The prosecutor frowned, irritated, but Judge Wright leaned forward, his voice low. "Thank you, Ms. Carter." His gaze drifted to the triplets, but the words blurred as memories thundered louder than the present. When the prosecutor pushed again, demanding that instability and poverty outweighed love, Marcus whispered harshly to Layla, "He doesn't know what he's talking about." Layla whispered back, "He doesn't care." Jordan clutched his folder tighter. The session dragged with statistics and accusations, but Wright heard only the ghost of his own words in that old letter. "I can't be a father right now. My family would never accept this. I'm sorry." And now here sat the consequence of that choice. 3 pairs of eyes staring at him. A mirror he couldn't escape. At the end of the day, he adjourned again, his voice rougher than usual, and retreated quickly to his chambers before anyone saw his face unravel. Angela gathered her children, whispering, "We'll keep fighting. Don't lose hope." Yet her eyes betrayed her fear, and Marcus noticed. He whispered to his sisters, "Something's not right. He knows something." That night, in their small apartment, Angela sat in silence at the kitchen table, her children huddled close. Layla pressed against her side, whispering, "Mama, what if they ask again about Daddy?" Angela's tears fell onto the papers before her. "Don't you worry about that. All you need to know is I'm enough." But Marcus, lying awake later, whispered to his siblings in the dark, "I think that Judge is our father." Layla gasped softly. Jordan's eyes widened, and in the silence that followed, The weight of those words pressed heavy like thunder before a storm. Meanwhile, in his private chambers, Judge Wright stared out at the city lights but saw only the past. He pulled an old photograph from his drawer, Tasha younger, her smile vibrant, holding a newborn. His throat burned with regret. He whispered to the empty room, "God forgive me. They're mine. They've always been mine." But forgiveness felt as distant as the stars beyond the courthouse windows. The next morning the courthouse buzzed with reporters, their whispers louder, their pens ready. The gossip had grown into speculation, and speculation into certainty. As Angela walked with her triplets, reporters leaned forward, their cameras flashing, and neighbors muttered, "Don't they look just like him?" Angela's chest tightened, her grip fierce on her children's hands. "Keep your eyes forward," she whispered. Inside the courtroom, every glance was sharper, every whisper louder. When Judge Wright entered, his robe felt heavier than ever, every step a burden. And when his gaze fell on the children, he couldn't hide the flicker of recognition. He forced his eyes down, slamming the gavel. "Court is in session," he barked, but even his bailiff's voice quivered, sensing the cracks. The prosecutor smirked, smelling blood. "Your Honor, perhaps the fastest way to resolve these disruptions is a paternity test." Gasps rippled across the gallery, the air electric. Angela stiffened, her voice breaking. "No, don't you dare drag them into that humiliation. Their father is gone. He doesn't matter." But Marcus, Layla, and Jordan turned as one toward the bench, their young faces unreadable, and Wright's chest constricted, as if the truth was reaching for him with their eyes. He slammed the gavel again, but his voice shook. The prosecutor, slick-haired and eager, rose immediately with a smile sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, yesterday we witnessed repeated disruptions from these children, all in defense of their mother. If the court truly wishes to weigh the stability of this household, perhaps the most efficient course is to hear directly from them, supervised, of course. Let them speak. If Ms. Brown has nothing to hide, surely she will allow it." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Angela's breath caught. "Your Honor, they're just children," she protested desperately. "This is not a stage play. This is their lives." Judge Wright's hands trembled around the gavel. He stared at the children, their faces steady, their eyes sharp, and something inside him shattered. "Sometimes children see the truth more clearly than adults," he said, his voice rough, betraying too much. "Proceed." The bailiff brought a small stool to the front, and Marcus climbed up first, his chest puffed out, trying to look older than his 7 years. The prosecutor smirked. "State your name, son." "Marcus Brown," the boy replied firmly. "And how old are you?" "7." "7 years old, Your Honor," the prosecutor scoffed, hardly a credible witness. But Marcus ignored him and turned straight to the judge. "I don't know what credible means, but I know my mama works harder than anybody. She cleans houses, she works at the diner, sometimes she doesn't even eat so we can. She never lets us go without. That's what a real mom does." The gallery murmured, some nodding, others wiping tears. Marcus's voice grew stronger. "You say she's unfit, but you don't know anything. She's the strongest person in the world, and I'll fight anybody who says different." He glared at the prosecutor, his fists clenched. "Objection," the prosecutor snapped, but Judge Wright's gavel came down with a shaky overruled. Angela covered her mouth, torn between terror and pride. Layla climbed the stool next, her ribbon slipping loose from her curls, her chin high. "Layla Brown," she declared, "I'm 7 too." Her eyes burned with fire as she turned toward the bench. "I know you all think my mama is weak because she doesn't have a husband, but she's stronger than 3 husbands put together. Every night she sings us to sleep even when she can barely keep her eyes open. When we get scared, she tells us stories. When we feel sad, she makes us laugh. That's love, and love is what makes a family, not money." Applause broke out before the bailiff barked for silence, but Layla pressed on. "You say we don't have discipline, that we're unruly. We're not unruly. We just know lies when we hear them. That man," she pointed straight at the landlord, "lied about us digging in trash cans. We don't do that. We have pride. We have our mama, and she gives us more than he ever could." The landlord's face flushed red, and whispers swept through the crowd like wildfire. Judge Wright swallowed hard, his vision blurring, because Layla's fiery defiance mirrored the woman he had once known, young Tasha standing tall despite the world. Finally, Jordan, the quietest of the three, shuffled to the stool, clutching his folder of certificates like a shield. His knees knocked together, his voice soft. "Jordan Brown, I'm 7. The courtroom leaned forward to hear him. "I'm not good at talking like Marcus or Layla, but I'm good at school because Mama makes me good. She stays up with me even when she's tired, even when her eyes close. She tells me I can be anything, and I believe her." He opened the folder, holding up his wrinkled certificates with shaky hands. "See? This is proof. She made me believe in myself. Nobody else did that. Not my teachers, not the neighbors, just her. If you take her away, I won't know who I am anymore. Because she's my heart. She's all of our hearts." Silence fell heavy, broken only by Angela's sobs. She pulled her son into her arms, Marcus and Layla crowding close until the four of them looked like one unbreakable unit. The gallery erupted in whispers. "They're incredible. Those kids love her more than life." And then the more dangerous murmur, spreading like sparks. "Don't they look like him? Don't they look like the judge?" Judge Wright's gavel slammed down, but his hand shook violently. "Order," he commanded, but his voice cracked. The prosecutor pounced, his confidence faltering, but his ambition sharper. "Your Honor, these are emotional theatrics. Clearly, the mother has manipulated these children into rehearsed performances. This proves nothing. What we need is clarity, and the only objective measure left is obvious, a paternity test." The words sliced through the room. Angela's knees buckled. "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "Don't drag them into that humiliation. Their father is gone, he doesn't matter." But the triplets' faces told a different story. Marcus glared at the judge, Layla's eyes brimmed with tears. Jordan clutched his certificates tighter, and Judge Wright could no longer steady his breath. The prosecutor pressed harder, his smile cruel. "Every child deserves the truth about their father." Marcus shoved a microphone away, his small face burning with defiance. "Leave us alone," he snapped, but the crowd only pressed closer. Inside the courthouse, the whispers followed them through the marble halls, every clerk, every lawyer stealing glances, every eye carrying the question that Angela dreaded. When Judge Wright entered, the room fell into an unnatural silence, not of respect, but of suspicion. The bailiff's voice shook as he called the court to order. Wright's robe felt like a chain across his shoulders, his gavel heavy in his hand, but he forced his voice to remain steady. The prosecutor rose with the confidence of a man who believed the case already belonged to him. "Your Honor," he began, "the situation has escalated beyond a custody dispute. This court now stands at the center of public doubt. The people demand clarity. For the integrity of this institution and the welfare of these children, I renew my motion for an immediate court-ordered paternity test." Gasps swept through the gallery like a wave, pens scratching across notepads as reporters scrambled to catch every word. Angela leapt to her feet, her voice breaking with fury. "No, you will not reduce my children to lab results for your spectacle. They are not trophies, they are not evidence, they are my babies." The prosecutor sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your babies, Ms. Brown, but they carry another man's blood. That man deserves to be named. And if that man is this court's presiding judge, then justice demands transparency." Angela's knees nearly gave way, but Marcus stood tall beside her, his small fists clenched. "He doesn't deserve nothing," the boy declared, his voice sharp with rage. The gavel slammed down. "Order." Judge Wright barked, but his voice trembled, betraying the storm in his chest. His eyes burned holes into the sealed envelope that lay unopened on his desk, the results of a test already completed. He had delayed reading them aloud as long as he could, but today there was no refuge left. His clerk handed the envelope over, his hands shaking as much as the judge's. The courtroom froze, every breath held, as Wright slit the paper with trembling fingers and unfolded the page. His eyes scanned the words, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. His throat constricted, but he forced the words past his lips. The DNA test confirms that I, Judge Anthony Wright, am the biological father of Marcus, Layla, and Jordan Brown. The gallery exploded into chaos. Gasps, shouts, reporters bolting for the doors, cameras flashing like lightning. Angela's knees buckled and she collapsed into her chair, her hands clutching her children as tears streamed down her face. The triplets clung to her fiercely, their small voices piercing through the noise. "We already knew," Layla cried. "He doesn't matter," Marcus shouted. Jordan buried his face against Angela's chest. "Mama, don't cry. We don't need him. We just need you." Wright's gavel slammed down again and again, but the sound was swallowed by the uproar. His mask of authority had shattered, and he stood no longer as a judge, but as a man stripped bare before the world. The prosecutor's smile widened like a predator's. "Well, Your Honor, or should I say Father, perhaps you should recuse yourself before this trial proceeds further. For the integrity of the bench, and for the good of these children, you can no longer preside." Whispers rose like wildfire. All these years he knew. Coward. Hypocrite. The words cut deeper than any ruling he had ever delivered. Wright rose slowly, his robe swirling around him like a shroud. "This court will maintain order," he said, his voice breaking. But the gallery no longer obeyed. Angela buried her face in her hands, sobbing openly. The children, however, refused to shrink. Marcus glared up at the man who had just named himself their father. "You think we care about your blood? We don't. You weren't there when Mama cried herself to sleep. You weren't there when she went hungry so we could eat. You weren't there at my fights when kids teased us for not having a daddy. You weren't there." His voice cracked, but his rage blazed. "Mama was." Layla's voice shook but carried strength as she added, "If you want to be our daddy now, it's too late. You can't just walk in because a piece of paper says so." Jordan lifted his certificates, his hands trembling. "See these? Mama made me who I am, not you. She's our real parent. You're just a stranger." The gallery gasped, some wiping tears, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Angela reached for her children, trying to hush them, but their voices carried louder than any gavel. She rose to her feet, her body trembling, her voice sharp with fury. "You see what you've done?" she shouted at the gallery, at the prosecutor, at the judge. "You dragged my babies into battles they never should have fought. You humiliated them, made them defend themselves. Defend me for what? For this." She waved toward the DNA papers. "They are not evidence. They are children. My children. And no test, no robe, no courtroom will change that." The room fell silent, even the prosecutor faltering as her words struck deep. Wright's gavel slipped from his grasp, clattering against the bench, his voice raw and desperate as he whispered, "Angela, children, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." But Marcus's glare cut through him like a blade. "Sorry doesn't feed us. Sorry doesn't fix 7 years. Sorry doesn't make you a father." Wright staggered, gripping the bench for balance. For years, he had condemned others from his seat, but now his own verdict fell heavier than any sentence he had ever delivered. The bailiff called for order, but the gallery was alive with chaos. Reporters shouting, neighbors gasping, lawyers whispering. Angela pulled her children close, her tears flowing like rivers, but her spine straightened. Neighbors whispered in the stairwells, church ladies shook their heads with sympathy, and strangers offered both prayers and insults in equal measure. Angela kept her curtains drawn, but even in the dim apartment she felt the eyes of the city pressing in, judging her as harshly as the court. Marcus paced the living room, his jaw set with defiance. "They can't tell us who our family is," he muttered again and again. Layla clung to Angela's waist, trembling each time the phone rang with another reporter begging for an interview. Jordan sat quietly at the kitchen table, his certificates spread out before him like fragile shields, his eyes fixed on the door as if expecting the world to burst in at any second. The courthouse was no calmer. Reporters swarmed the steps, protesters clashed outside, and inside the halls clerks gossiped openly about Judge Wright's disgrace. Wright himself sat alone in his chambers, his robe heavy across his chair, but not on his shoulders, for he had torn it off the night before. His desk was littered with unopened letters from colleagues and summonses from the Judicial Board demanding explanations. The Chief Justice had called him personally, his voice flat and merciless. "You have humiliated this court, Anthony. If you do not resign, we will strip you of your seat publicly." Wright's hands had trembled as he held the phone, his eyes drifting again and again to the faces of Marcus, Layla, and Jordan etched in his memory. He whispered to the silence, "I thought I buried this, but I buried them instead." Back at the apartment, Angela gathered her children around the table, her voice firm but trembling. "Listen to me, babies. No matter what happens in court, you are mine. No judge, no paper, no DNA test can change that." Layla sniffled and asked, "Mama, will he try to take us?" Angela's throat tightened. "He has no right," she said, though inside she feared the system would find a way. Jordan whispered softly, "But if he is our daddy, doesn't that mean he can?" Angela shook her head fiercely. "A real father is someone who stays. He didn't stay. He doesn't get to decide now." Marcus slammed his fist on the table, his small face blazing. "Then we'll tell the whole world he doesn't deserve us." Angela reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his anger sharper than his years. "We're not broken, Mama. We're stronger than him." 2 nights later, as rain hammered the city, a knock rattled their door. Angela froze, her heart racing as she cracked it open. Judge Wright stood there drenched, his eyes hollow, his shoulders sagging under years of guilt. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I had to see them," he whispered, his voice rough. "Just once." Before Angela could stop him, Marcus stepped forward, his glare burning hotter than the storm outside. "You think you can just show up after 7 years? After everything? Go back to your big house. You don't belong here." Wright's lips trembled. "Marcus, I am your father." "No," the boy snapped, his voice sharp as steel. "You're just a man in a robe." The words hit harder than any gavel Wright had ever dropped, and he staggered back as Angela's voice cracked. "Leave. Don't come back." He looked as if he might collapse right there in the hallway, but with a nod heavy as stone, he turned and disappeared into the rain. Inside, Angela sank against the door, her whole body shaking. Marcus stood rigid, his fists clenched, while Layla and Jordan buried their faces against her sides. "Mama," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling despite his defiance. "He knows. He knows he's our daddy." Angela's tears spilled silently. She had kept the truth buried for so long, but now even her children could see it. "Don't you dare call him that," she said, her voice fierce. "He gave up that right the day he left." Across town, Wright poured whiskey in his mansion, staring at his reflection in the dark window. His walls were lined with awards that now mocked him. For years, he had sentenced others for their failures. Now his own failure consumed him whole. He whispered their names through his tears. "Marcus, Layla, Jordan, forgive me." But the silence answered back, heavy and merciless. The next morning, newspapers blared new headlines. Judge's secret family exposed. Talk radio raged with callers demanding his resignation. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse holding signs that read justice for Angela and "Step down, Wright." The judiciary convened an emergency hearing, and by noon the news broke. Judge Anthony Wright had officially recused himself from the case. His career hung by a thread, his resignation expected within days. In court, a new judge, Naomi Ellis, took the bench, her calm presence steadying the storm just enough to proceed. The prosecutor tried to seize the moment, his voice triumphant as he declared, "Your Honor, given the confirmed paternity and Ms. Brown's unstable finances, the state must consider transferring custody to the father who can provide stability." Angela shot to her feet, her voice ringing out like a blade. "He abandoned us. He left me with nothing but 3 hungry mouths and the strength God gave me. He may share their blood, but he is no father. Do not punish my children for his cowardice." The gallery murmured, some wiping tears, others shaking their heads at the prosecutor's arrogance. Judge Ellis raised a hand for silence. "We will hear evidence before ruling." Angela's knees trembled, but Marcus reached for her hand. "Mama, stand tall," he whispered. And for the first time in days, she lifted her chin and faced the court with fire in her eyes. As the day ended, Angela led her children out past the reporters, their voices shouting questions. The final day of the trial dawned heavy with tension. The courthouse swarmed with reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers who had followed every twist of the case, their voices rising in chants outside the marble steps as Angela Brown held the hands of her 3 children and led them through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning, microphones shoved forward, questions hurled in rapid fire. "Angela, do you think you'll win custody? Kids, do you see Judge Wright as your father?" Marcus shoved past them, his jaw set like stone, while Layla pressed close to Angela's waist and Jordan clutched his folder of certificates like a shield. Inside, the halls buzzed with whispers, the air thick with judgment, but Angela kept walking, her chin high, though her heart trembled. In the courtroom, Judge Naomi Ellis took her seat at the bench, her calm gaze steadying the chaos. She banged her gavel once, and the gallery hushed. "This court will hear final testimony before rendering a decision," she announced. The prosecutor rose first, his suit gleaming under the lights, his voice sharp as he declared, "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Ms. Brown is unemployed, facing eviction, and unable to provide the stability these children deserve. Their father, Judge Anthony Wright, though disgraced, possesses wealth, resources, and the means to give them a better life. The state urges the court to consider custody transfer in the children's best interest." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Angela rose to her feet, her voice trembling with fire. "Better life," she spat. "That man abandoned us. He left me with nothing but my babies and the strength in my bones. He never once came to feed them, never wiped their tears, never stood at their school plays or beside me when the rent was due. Do not call him a father. He is a man with money, but he is no father." Her words cut the room to silence, but the prosecutor smirked, turning to Judge Ellis. "Love does not pay bills, Your Honor. Love does not feed growing children. Love does not keep the lights on." Before Angela could respond, Marcus leapt to his feet, his voice ringing through the chamber. "Yes, it does. Mama's love fed us when food didn't. Mama's love kept us warm when the heat was cut off. Mama's love made us strong enough to stand here today. Don't you dare say it's not enough." The gallery erupted in murmurs, some clapping softly before the bailiff barked for order. Layla stood too, her ribbon slipping loose from her hair, her eyes blazing. "A real family isn't about money. It's about who stays. Mama stayed. He didn't. That's the only truth that matters." Jordan, trembling but determined, lifted his folder high. "And if you want proof, here it is. Mama made me believe I could do this. She made me believe I was smart. She made me believe I was worth something. Not him. Never him." Tears welled in Angela's eyes as she reached to steady her children, but their voices carried louder than any gavel. Judge Ellis leaned forward, her gaze sweeping across the room. "We have heard much in this courtroom," she said slowly. "We have heard lies and truths, accusations and confessions. But what echoes most is the loyalty of 3 children who refuse to be broken." She turned her gaze to Angela, then to the prosecutor. "The law asks me to act in the best interest of a child. It does not define best as marble floors or bank accounts. It defines best as safety, love, and consistency." She paused, letting her words sink deep into the silence. "Legal custody remains with Ms. Angela Brown. The state will provide immediate stabilization assistance, including rental support, food aid, and job placement priority. There will be no transfer of custody to the biological father. Any future contact must begin with restorative family counseling at the mother's discretion and the father's expense. This is not a prize to be won. It is an invitation to accountability." For a heartbeat, the courtroom held its breath, and then the gallery erupted in gasps, tears, and scattered applause. Angela's knees buckled, but Marcus caught her arm, his little face fierce with pride. Layla clung tighter to her waist, whispering, "We did it, Mama." Jordan buried his face against her chest, his certificates pressed between them like proof of victory. Reporters scribbled furiously. Neighbors murmured amens, and Pastor Daniels, seated quietly at the back, closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Across the room, Judge Wright sat slumped in silence, his face pale, his robe already stripped from him in more ways than one. For the first time in his life, he had no authority, no control, no mask to hide behind. He rose slowly, his eyes brimming with tears as he whispered, "I'm sorry." But Marcus glared at him with the fire of 7 years of abandonment. Sorry doesn't feed us. Sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Wright staggered back, gripping the bench, and for once in his long career, he had been handed a verdict heavier than any he had ever pronounced. Guilty of being absent, guilty of cowardice, guilty of losing the right to call himself a father. Angela pulled her children close and rose to her full height, her tears falling, but her chin high. "We are leaving," she said firmly, her voice carrying over the noise. The four of them walked out together, hand in hand, past cameras and questions, through a crowd that now cheered instead of mocked. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled of rain, fresh and clean, as if the storm had finally broken. 6 months later, Angela held a new set of keys in her hand. Keys to a small but brighter apartment where the floors gleamed and the fridge held more food than bills. A magnet calendar on the door held school events instead of eviction dates. She wore a name tag that read Angela Brown, Patient Services, Grady Memorial Hospital, a job that gave her steady hours and dignity she had fought so long to earn. Marcus came home one evening, tossing his backpack aside, his grin wide. "Coach says I'm starting this weekend." Layla burst through the door behind him, clutching a flyer. "Mama, the showcase is Saturday. I've got a solo. You'll be there, right?" Jordan followed slower, clutching a letter with a gold seal. "I made the district spelling team," he whispered shyly. Angela laughed through her tears, spinning him in her arms. "Look at you," she whispered. "Look at what love has done." That night after dinner, they piled on the couch together, cartoons humming softly in the background, their small bodies pressed against hers, the world outside finally quiet. A knock came at the door, and Angela stiffened. Through the peephole stood Anthony, Wright, no robe, no title, just a man with regret in his eyes and a plain envelope in his hand. She opened the door a crack. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "Only to give you this," he said, holding out the envelope. "It's for them. College funds. 3 accounts. No strings." She stared at him, then at the check inside. "Guilt is loud," she said sharply. "This isn't guilt," he whispered. "This is responsibility. I'm in counseling, like Judge Ellis ordered. I know I can't erase the past, but I want to do something right." She didn't answer, just closed the door softly in his face. From the couch, Marcus called, "Mama, who was it?" Angela wiped her tears and said, "Nobody you need to carry." She tucked them in later that night, kissing each forehead, whispering the same truth she had carried all along. Blood can name you. Love will raise you. Choose the hands that hold when everything else lets go. And in that small apartment, under a roof that finally felt like home, love chose again and again until morning. The end. If this story made you feel something, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Angela was right to stand her ground against the system and Judge Wright, or should she have allowed him a chance to prove himself as a father? Let me know what you think about the ending and what part of the story struck you the hardest. Also, tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has reached. And if you want more stories like this one, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Your support means a lot, and it helps these stories keep going.